Hello there. I'm Amy Williams, and I'm here in our Advent group to talk about triggers as opportunities. And I'm hoping that some of you will join me. I'm going to wait a minute and let a few of you join, and I hope wherever you are that you're doing well and staying safe and coping with all the changes that we have going on. I'm missing seeing all of you, even though I'm kind of an introvert and I stay in my office a lot. I realize how it's so nice to have community together, and it's been really an adjustment to not go to my lovely office every day and see you all. Hey, Mike. Thank you for joining. And so it's just been an adjustment for all of us. And so I was talking to Sam about different topics that I could share, and I thought about sharing this idea that I do a lot in therapy, where we explore how triggers are really opportunities for healing. First, I want to say that, hey, Bridget, I'm not very good at lighting, and since I have glasses, it's been kind of weird to find the right lighting, so forgive me for not having the best lighting expertise, but hopefully this material will help you, and I'll save the video, and I'm also going to do a document that you all can download or use for homework. I'm glad to share. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and then if you all have some questions, post them, and I'll try to keep track. I like to draw pictures, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by drawing a picture of, this is you, and one day you were born, you came from a family of origin, and so you've inherited all kinds of things. You've inherited biological things, you've inherited habits, you've inherited tendencies, and so you inherit a lot, but you also have a unique personality. So even if you have siblings, you will have different experiences in your family of origin. And I'm an only child, so I just thought, oh, it'd be so cool to have siblings, but people I know that have siblings often still have very different experiences depending on if you're the firstborn or the middle child or the youngest or the only child. But what happens is we're born from this lineage, and then we have our unique personality, and then we have something called experiences. So from the time that you're in the womb until today, where you're sitting in here with me, you have experiences that happen. Some of these could be even in the womb, or they could be in very early childhood. And we all have experiences, but sometimes they're very difficult. So depending on your family system and your personality, what could be a trauma to me might be mild to you. What might be a trauma to you might be mild to me, or it might just be a trauma, period. But the point is, we have these events and these things that happen, some of which we remember and some of which we don't, and they affect us. Now, why am I talking about this and drawing this picture? Because you have all this life experience from the time you're in the womb. So out here, coronavirus happens, and it has a lot of effect on us. And anytime, whether it's coronavirus or anything that affects you a lot emotionally, I consider that to be a trigger. So I'll set this down for a minute to talk to you. So if you think about any time that something happens and you have a much stronger reaction than kind of what it's warranted, or it brings a lot of extreme emotion like anxiety and distress, it's likely that that's a trigger. And so triggers, a lot of times if we feel uncomfortable, we feel very emotional, especially in a negative way, we want to get away from that. We want to push it away. We want to feel better. This is why people drink, use drugs, overwork, escape with TV, because we get overwhelmed and we get triggered by something that feels very emotional. We don't know what to do about it, and so we escape. But what I'm going to offer you today is that triggers are really an opportunity to wake up and to really engage some coping skills, and to see anything you're really emotional about is an opportunity for healing. So these are ideas. I'm going to give you an example. If you grew up in a family that struggled financially and you didn't have a lot of resources and you didn't have enough food, I know a lot of people that grew up like this that didn't have enough food growing up, then now all of a sudden, maybe you're doing okay in life. You don't really struggle with needing groceries or the basics, but now all of a sudden coronavirus comes and you can't, it's hard to get to the store. You can't get things you need. This is what I would call a trigger. So it's something that's totally, often it's unrelated to what you experienced in your childhood. It's related, but it's unrelated. So it can bring up this feeling of panic. Now, if I, for example, grew up, let's just say I had other childhood issues, but having enough food wasn't one of them, wasn't an issue that I had, then that's not going to affect me as much. And I may be like, why is Mike, for example, or Bridget, why are they freaking out? I would say that lovingly, of course, and not with judgment. I might just be observing, like, why are they so upset? Well, they're upset because this is bringing up something unhealed from your past. And I might have different ones. So, for example, the truth is I grew up an only child in the Midwest, and my parents had, they didn't have anything really when I was born, and they worked a lot. So one of the things I had as an issue growing up was feeling lonely. So even though I'm an introvert, before coronavirus, when I was an introvert, I could still go downstairs and say hi to somebody. I could still meet a friend for tea. Even though I can do that now virtually, it's different, and it can bring up feelings of loneliness, and it can trigger that in me. Whereas, for example, if that's not an issue that you had, then it may not be triggering that for you. So one of the things I wanted to share with you is just this reminder. We all have potentially unhealed wounds from our past. Now, some people don't like to go and look at the past. My family of origin really does not like going back and looking at the past. They're like, it's over, there's no point. There was a part of my life where I just dwelled on the past, like I just would be obsessed with it. Maybe because I grew up in a family that didn't ever want to look at the past. So I think that what I've come to see is, especially when we get triggered or we feel really emotional or something happens, it's really an opportunity to go back to the past and to see what in us needs healed. So one thing I do in my therapy practice is inner child work, where we actually go back to have you go back to meet your childlike self and learn to comfort yourself and become the adult who can heal and soothe that wounded part of you. And I'll just share that idea today, but whether you want to do inner child work or not, it can be very helpful to see that things that come up that are distressing more than normal are really important opportunities for healing. And actually what I would say is the more emotional something affects you, the more opportunity for healing there is. So I came up with a little handout that I'm going to attach as a PDF when this video is over. And I would encourage you, if you're a journaler or you want to share it, you can go through it and you can explore it and maybe do some journaling about it. But here are the steps that I want to encourage you to consider. And I would love to know, if you want to tell me, well, let's just start here. I'll just say number one of the 5 steps is awareness. So as somebody who works as a therapist and I'm a very introspective person, sometimes I forget that many people just struggle with having awareness. So just knowing, hey, I'm aware this is coming up a lot in me. I'm feeling really emotional about this. One silly thing that I think this has triggered for me is I would like a yard. And so I've been really jealous. Like, I didn't really think about that before this happened because I was pretty mobile if I wanted to ride my bike, or I have family members that have a yard, or I go hiking all the time. And so it's almost triggered in me, even feeling sometimes bad about myself. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're this old and you don't have a yard. But like 2 months ago, that didn't bother me so much. So just having the awareness of, wow, like, this is bringing up something in me. So awareness, just knowing like, I'm having these feelings. They don't feel too good. They're not particularly constructive and helping me. The second thing is owning it. And owning it means that even if somebody did something wrong to you or against you as a child or as an adult, right now, if you're in distress, this is your problem. And really taking the focus off what somebody else did to you, whether your parents did something wrong, or a sibling, or a business that you used to be in, or a spouse or an ex-spouse. Even if you were truly the victim in a situation, to own it and say, this problem that I have now, this feeling really angry, feeling really vulnerable or jealous or sad, is now my issue. And I'm responsible for doing something about it. The third step is to not blame or shame yourself. So what can happen is we can get triggered and emotions can come up, and we either want to lash out at somebody else or we want to lash out at ourselves. And so that's kind of what I did when things came up about like people having yards. I started being like, oh my God, you're so pathetic. Because that's what I do. Like, I can always tell, like, that's a word I use with myself that's very harsh. And what that tells me is I've been really triggered when I use those words of blaming and shaming myself. And so to stop that and to go to self-compassion and to be like, hey, I really believe in my life, I choose to believe that other people have done the best they could, and I also have done the best that I could. So in any given experience, like, they're doing the best they could, I'm doing the best I could. So blaming and shaming myself or other people is not really constructive. The fourth step is acknowledging that I'm an adult now. Now, this may sound silly, but I know a lot of times we can get stuck like we're even a child, like we're stuck in our child, like we're a child, even though we're an adult. And so I've had to learn that, and I'm going to share a personal trigger here just to give you an example. In therapy, there's something called an abreaction, and what that means is that you have a physiological response to something as an adult that you might have experienced earlier, or you have something as a trigger now related to something earlier. So when I was growing up, my dad drank, and I remember as a young girl, sometimes it would be embarrassing, and he would give me a kiss on the cheek, and it wasn't really necessarily inappropriate. It was just like, it just was embarrassing. He was drinking, and I could smell it when he kissed me on the cheek. So as an adult, when I was in a relationship with somebody that was not an alcoholic, and they drank a beer and would kiss me on the cheek, it's like I could just burst into tears, because it was like that physiological response to something of my childhood that still lived in me, in my mind-body complex. So a lot of times we forget that we're like, it's like this physiological response. So it's important to keep reminding yourself, I'm an adult now. I'm in a different relationship, or if you're not, maybe you need to do work to get into healthier relationships. And I have the ability to go back and heal myself. So this is another self-disclosure. I think a lot of my life I've looked for another person to fix a lot of those things for me, to tell me what was wrong with me, to make me feel better. And a huge discovery I've made over the course of work I've done is that I am the adult who can go back and heal this part of myself. And so what I need to learn is coping skills, good communication, setting boundaries. What are the values that I want in relationship, and that I pick people that have values that coincide with mine to let into my world. Because if I pick people that don't respect me, then it's going to keep testing my boundaries and it's going to keep bringing up stuff. So to remember, like, I am the adult who can now, I'm not the little kid anymore, because a lot of times as kids, we really are victims, and it's hard as an adult to move out of that and see I'm not a victim anymore. So if something triggers me, that's my work to do, and I can change that. Let's see what you all are saying. Yes, sometimes we forget that we are grown and are stronger for those struggles and experiences. And Bridget, I want to know what you thought was a good point. So hopefully we'll check back in about that. Yes, it's easy to forget, because what happens is we get stuck in these places, these little triggers like I've drawn, we get stuck back there. It's not even like we're conscious of it. It's not like we wake up in the morning like, I'm a victim, or my wounded child is dominating my day. It's just that we get up and we think we're functioning and doing well, but something will trigger us. And then again, we can go into either not having awareness and wanting to just shut down and do habits that aren't helpful, blame other people, blame ourselves. But to remember, I'm an adult now, and I can make choices to heal this and to grow. And then the fifth thing I wanted to mention is that to remember that this is a journey and a process. And this is where self-compassion is so important, like being compassionate to ourselves. So I don't know if those of you watching, if you are harsh on yourself. Many people are very harsh on themselves. So can you be kind to yourself? I teach a therapy theory called transactional analysis, which I love. And in transactional analysis, it talks about we have different parts of our personality. So we have a parent, an adult, and a childlike part of us. Whether we have children or not, we have a childlike part. It's our fun part of us. Even if we're not parents, we have a parent part of us. And then there's an adult. One of the things in the parent is there's like a critical and a nurturing parent. And the critical parent is should, like, you should have done this, you shouldn't have done that. And you may have grown up with a very critical parent. Sometimes it's obvious they're criticizing you, and sometimes it's not. But what can happen is we can develop that critical parent and become very critical of ourselves. We can also become critical of other people. So the idea is to cultivate the more nurturing parent part of us, to be more nurturing, to encourage ourselves like you would encourage someone that you love, and remember that this is a journey and a process. So you keep having compassion, you keep encouraging yourself, you remember to have fun. And then the adult part of transactional analysis, maybe I'll do another video on that in the future, depending on the Advent schedule. The adult is just the problem solver, and a lot of us don't learn the skills of adults. So if you grew up in a household or with a family, or you somehow learned the skills of adulthood, like what are healthy coping skills? How do you communicate effectively? How do you choose relationships and set boundaries? Like if you learned those things, that's fabulous. Many of us didn't. And so part of dealing with triggers and learning from them is remembering, like, I'm on this journey and this process, and I need to learn coping skills. I need to learn, I don't know if any of you have ever had this happen where you get triggered and you have to do something about it. This comes up in therapy a lot with people that I work with, and I've done it myself. So it's like somebody hurts you and you have to immediately address it. Now, some people get triggered and hurt and they don't want to address it. Like they will become reclusive. I'm more of the kind, like I have to address it right away. So what I found is the more I do my personal growth work and I learn coping skills of like, I learn how to soothe myself, like it's okay, this is going to be okay, then I can be, I'm going to read Bridget's in a second. Then I can the more I can soothe myself and have good coping skills, like I'm going to go listen to some music, I'm going to go read something inspirational, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to paint. And then like I let myself calm down, then I come back to deal with that from a higher perspective than if I'm like triggered and I have to deal with it right away. So the idea is when we're triggered is you don't run away and never get back to it, but you also don't have to react and deal with it right away. This comes up a lot in couples because sometimes maybe one person in the couple gets overwhelmed and the other one needs a response right away. Okay, so it's like one person may not feel safe, like I need an answer, I need you to tell me what's going on. The other one may feel overwhelmed and need to retreat, and then their retreating just feeds the anxiety of the other person and it creates more chaos. So the idea is like, how can we find that balance where we address things from a higher perspective? And again, this is part of learning coping skills and learning emotional maturity and growth. Okay, not having a yard part. Yes. So for you is finding how to best deal without having people around. That's where I often gain energy from, even though I can draw from self. Balance issues. So Bridget, I think what I'm hearing you say is that I'm guessing, are you an extrovert? If you're an extrovert, I'm so glad you brought this up. I don't even know if this is the point that you're saying, and then I'm going to get to what Mike said. If you're an extrovert and now you have to be home from coronavirus, that can actually be a trigger. So I'm talking more about childhood stuff, but it isn't even always about something tragic from your childhood. It could just be you're an extrovert and you could actually be a pretty healthy, balanced person without any major childhood trauma, and now you're an extrovert and you miss having people around. I have been hearing from people who are more extroverted that it's really hard to be home and not be around people. So you're a mixture of an extrovert and an introvert. And I think what can happen in this situation is being forced. Like if you're forced to not be around people, that can trigger you. So in our regular lives, if you're an extrovert, but you need to cultivate your introvert, you have the freedom to do that. Now we don't have as much freedom, and that can be another trigger too. Like we're very used to freedom in our culture for the most part, and so we can also be triggered because now, I just read earlier, somebody shared that, they were taking away our rights to be out socializing, and that's a right to be able to be out. And that kind of is true. However, there are limitations now that you're not supposed to be out doing certain things just for the safety of all people. But people that want to be I deserve to be out, what I would say is they're being triggered. It's an extreme example of that. And then Mike, you said anxious avoidant attachment. I know you will have to tell me more about that. I'd like to know more about what you're saying about that. So if you want to comment more about the anxious avoidant attachment, feel free to post more about that here. So let's see how we're doing on time. We have about 6 minutes left. Yes, forced freedom removed. When you have something forced on you, it can be very difficult. Okay, good. So, do you all have any questions? Or I hope this is helpful. It's kind of like you've had in a relationship. Yes. So I know there's a lot of There's some great resources on anxious, avoidant personality types and dynamics. It's kind of like not coming into my head right now, but I think what you've touched on, Mike, is important. I'm going to think about that, and maybe I'll do a little comment in the bottom after the video is done. So I hope this is helpful. It's, like I said, it's kind of been a little mini therapy session, education. A lot of the therapy I do is more like teaching people things that I've learned that I think are helpful, and I hope that these things have been helpful to you. I guess I would leave you with just a few thoughts in our time that we have, is just to remember, yes, that book is very good, and I haven't read it in a while, but I can put some resources for that in here. Thank you for including that. There's a lot of good information in that book. So just to remember that when you get triggered, it's okay. You're safe. I hope you're safe. I think you're safe. Usually when we get triggered, it's not life-threatening, although we may think it is. Even actually, our heart rate can go up depending on what's triggering you in your past experience. This is where the body can go into high cortisol production. You know, we go into the fight, flight, or freeze. If you think about it, as a child, you couldn't probably fight. I mean, some people do as children, and you couldn't really flee. So a lot of us freeze. And there is research in trauma research that when something traumatic happens to us, especially when we're younger, that energy gets frozen in us. And actually, animals in nature, when they get traumatized, they actually shake. And so I'll sometimes have people do that, like when you're thinking about, so I'm going to give you that homework as body homework. If something is triggering you now, during the coronavirus especially, think about whatever it is that's bothering you, and then just like a dog that has water on its coat, and just shake and see how that feels. Sit and do some breathing. Another thing is to connect with your inner child. I did a YouTube video on that recently, and I can share the link to that here, of how to go back and be with a part of yourself, the younger part of yourself, to say, hey, guess what? Little you, little Bridget, little Mike, little Wade, like I think Renee was watching, little whoever, you know, your little you, and say, I'm here for you now. I love you. I care about you. I'm going to take care of this with you. So the example I gave about food, like if you didn't have food growing up and enough food, and now going to the store is triggering you, you would just imagine saying to that little part of you, hey, little Amy, like, it's okay. You're not going to starve. Like, I'm an adult now. We're going to figure this out, and it's going to be okay. And as you can imagine, having supportive community helps. Like, I'm pretty sure if I thought I was going to starve, I could find somebody to help me. But when we're triggered, we forget these things. And so ideally, it's best to go back ourselves and remind this part of ourself, it's okay. I'm going to take care of this. You're going to be okay. I love you. I'm here for you. We're going to work this out. So let's see if anybody else said anything else. I think that was it, and we're about at 5 o'clock. So I miss you all in person. I will look forward to seeing you again, depending on how long this goes, and if there's a need, I'm glad to come back and do another video. If you all individually have anything that I can help you with, I'm glad to do that, even if it's just a little something. Like, let's just say you're in a jam about something, or you're frustrated, or you're perplexed, and thank you, Sam. You have a struggle, just, you know, reach out to me, and I would love to help you solve that problem. Sometimes we just need somebody to, like, listen, give us a new idea, validate how we're feeling, because we are definitely in this together. And isn't the Advent community amazing? I love our Advent community and just the fact that we do things like this. So I'm going to post some resources that you can explore. And I just want to remind you, all the investment that you invest in yourself is the best investment you'll ever make in your life. So Regardless of what's going on with the stock market and all kinds of other things, when you invest in yourself, it's a fantastic investment. So spend time nurturing yourself, being there for yourself, because then you can be there more for other people. All right. Many thank yous and blessings to you, and I will see you later. Bye.